Gather ye round, fellow travelers, for it is time for another session of Hunting for Knowledge with Nera. So, in this session, we're going to be reading the book called The Wild Elves. Let's get started. In the wilds of every province of Tamriel, descended philosophically, if not directed from the original inhabitants of the land, are the Aelids, commonly called the Wild Elves, while three races of elven stock, the Altmer, or High Elves, the Bosmer, or Wood Elves, and the Dunmer, or Dark Elves, have assimilated well into the new cultures of Tamriel. The Aelids and their brethren have remained aloof toward our civilization, preferring to practice the old ways far from the eyes of the world. The Wild Elves speak a variation of Old Cyrodiilic, opting to shun Tamrielic and separating themselves from the mainstream of Tamriel even further than the least urbanized of their elven cousins. In temperament, they are dark-spirited and taciturn, though this is from the point of view of outsiders, or Belani, in their tongue, and doubtless they act differently within their own tribes. Indeed, one of the finest sages of the University of Gwilym was a civilized Aeliad elf, Chorhain Fire, First Era year 2790 to Second Era year 227, whose published work on wild elves suggests a lively, vibrant culture. Fire is one of the very few Aelids that to speak freely on his people and religion, and he himself said, "The nature of Aelid tribes is multi-hued, their personalities often widely different from their neighboring tribes." Fire T, Nature of Aelidic Posse, page 8, University of Gwilym Press, Second Era, year 12. Like any alien culture, wild elves are often feared by the simple people of Tamriel. The Aelids continue to be one of the greatest enigma of the continent of Tamriel. They seldom appear in the page of written history in any role, and then only as a strange sight a chronicler stumbles upon before they vanish into the woods. When probable fiction is filtered from common legend, we are left with almost nothing. The mysterious ways of the Aelids have remained shrouded since before the First Era, and many will remain for so thousands of years to come. This was a very interesting read as well. As you can tell, a lot of the readings that are in throughout the land of Morrowind are very fascinating. A lot of very, very powerful literature. So, let's begin analyzing it. So, it talks about those who originally inhabited this land, Aelid. We call them the Wild Elves, and they consist of three separate sub-races as the Altmer, Bosmer, and Dunmer, which the inhabitants of Morrowind are. Then that also includes Nera himself. We are the Dunmer. And it's saying how, although they have assimilated to the new culture of Tamriel, it seems as though the Aelids have tried to keep their own culture, preserve their own culture, even to the point of shunning out basically what it would be known as the commonly spoken language. It seems as though culture was very important to them, and I cannot blame them for it, because if we think about it, right? Tamriel is the land. It's the entire land in which all the continents, well, not continents, but the best way to summarize it, the separate nations, they all live. What is it wrong for them to want to keep their old traditions? Is it wrong that they do not want to do a language that everyone speaks? In fact, if I'm not mistaken, even as we speak now, we are speaking in the Tamrielic language, not the Old Cyrodiilic language. But what's very interesting, though, is although these people did not want to change their customs, kind of seems like over time, especially right now in the Third Era, kind of seems like we have changed our ways. And we've changed our ways more than one. It almost seems to me that it's because of the Imperials. If we think about it, the Imperials, they're everywhere. They are in every section. They're in Skyrim. They're, well, in Morrowind. They're in Daggerfell. They're in Daggerfell. They're in, what's that? I forgot the name of that one nation. However, it is very important to consider the fact that the Imperials, almost in a way, they spread and advocated the Timrilic language to make sure that everyone spoke it. Because everyone in Morrowind, whom we speak to, they don't use their old language. They use this common language. They don't use the old Cyrodiilic. However, I do realize that the inhabitants of Morrowind, they do retain their own culture, at least. At least they're able to retain their own culture, which is a good thing. However, it almost seems as though from centuries of, could be from colonization or honestly just even forced upon the inhabitants of Morrowind, it could be for those reasons. We unfortunately won't know, and hopefully we will get to learn as we continue reading different literature. Now, if we go over here, it even says that one of the most famous ones would even say that the nature of the people is multi-hued. Their personality is often wildly different from their neighboring tribes. I can definitely get that because, of course, the different races of, the Dunmer, it just occurred to me. The Altmer, the Bosmer, and the Dunmer. I think the Altmer might also be known as the Thalmor. They might be the same, I believe so. But anyways, back to what we were saying here. It is rather interesting that and it does make sense. They are different people, and of course they would have their own separate cultures. Now, another interesting thing here is the way they also call it alien culture. It says, like any alien culture, wild elves are often feared by the people of Tamriel. But see, is it really alien if... I guess where I struggle is, how could we call it alien if it's supposedly a culture that has been around for many eras, many years at this point, to the point where this information was released in the beginning of the Second Era? This is a culture that's been there. How could it be so alien unless, and this is of course just going based off of the literature here, we do not know enough information. However, it is possible to assume at least that the people may have closed themselves off from outside influence because they didn't want to learn other cultures. They wanted, just as the aliens didn't want to convert to other cultures, it almost seems like this culture was also reserved. So we kind of have two reserved factions kind of working counter against each other. Very fascinating read. It kind of gives us a little bit more of information of what we would say the Elven ways. So that was a very interesting episode of this. So thank you for coming, travelers, and I hope to see you again in the next session of Hunting for Knowledge.